throughout the Americas, Europe, Asia, and the Pacific. Gustavo currently serves the faculty for the MFA Art Practice Program at the NYU Tisch School of the Arts. And I met Renato when I got to New York City in 2010 at the first session of our faculty working group on racism in comparative perspective. You had come here to hear and to visit with Charlie Hill, who was inaugurating that working group. But I had been reading and using your books, Ilongot Headhunting, A Study in Society and History, and Culture and Truth, for a long time before I met you. There are other books that marked me as well: Cultural Citizenship in Island Southeast Asia, National Belonging and Borderlands, and Anthropology of Globalization. And I started to be familiar with his work since my years at the University of Arizona, and later as a director of a college semester abroad program in Cochabamba, Bolivia, where in 2016 it was, you got there, you visited and gave a lecture at the Centro de Estudios Superiores, and everybody was happy about that. Gustavo and Mary Louise, not you, I'm confused, but the other musician who also traveled with you to Cochabamba and Mary Louise were in Cochabamba with you. And everybody says that it was a very happy occasion for all Bolivian anthropologists then. From what I could gather, the two of you had a wonderful visit and a very important learning experience, and I wish I could have been there. But it was in Tucson, at the University of Arizona in the early 80s, that I became familiar with your intellectual trajectory and the way in which Renato, along with Chicana feminists and other feminists and Latino anthropologists, we gave shape to Chicano studies. And what now, and also gave shape to what now can be called border anthropology, and those experiences of crossing all kinds of borders, internal to the self and external. You were thus able to be an ethnographer of Chicano life on the borderlands from the 50s to the present, and I was lucky to have met you there. It is in New York City, however, that I learned about the way connected anthropology and poetry. Me regaló él su libro, Anthropoesía, The Days of Shelley's Death, the Poetry and Ethnography book. Reading that book was crucial for me, since I was also in the process of reconnecting in my work, within me, loss and grief. Constant themes in your work, Renato. His Anthropoesía, your Anthropoesía in the Chaser, I believe, takes a different turn. You now speak of loss, but using this new prose poetry, you reconnect with your Tucson high school friends. You make us feel that it is possible to build different forms of community in different times and spaces, in globalized ones at that. This book and life then becomes an example of aging beautifully, contradictorily, and graciously. An example of creating and recreating ourselves anew. I became a Chicana in Tucson, and then a Chicana feminist, in part thanks to your work. Thank you for that, and for choosing CLACS and the Latinx project and your anthropology department to present your book. This is your first presentation of the book. Thank you. Could you please pass the So, Renato will, do you want to sit, or do you want to be in the podium? Great, okay. And then we're gonna have Alyshia and Renato enter in dialogue, and then we're going to expand the dialogue. And te dejo, Renato.
Okay, gracias. Thank you. That was a wonderful, warm, generous introduction. Thank you so much. I will say one thing, is that the most meaningful reading of this book that I've given has been To the Chasers. And you can imagine that when I read it to the Chasers, I was sitting facing the person whose words I was using, and I was scared to death. Because I thought they'd say, "That's not me. I never would have said that, not that way." But they didn't. And they were very moved, and I said, "I got it right. I got it right." That meant everything to me. So I think you've got the picture that I'll read, and accompanying me as I read will be Gustavo Aguilar. He'll be playing various instruments in his amazing compositions. And then after that, I'll then have a conversation with Alyshia Galvez. We'll just be sitting in those chairs and talking. And then afterwards, there'll be a reception outside, and I'll sit at the table for a while signing books. Because I went into poetry for the money, you see. Every now and then I say that to see if anybody's listening. It's a test. There's also a pop quiz that I should mention, and that is that the Chasers on page 3, page 19, and a later page with showing Bobby Shoemaker, the Chasers are all in those photographs wearing the same suit jacket and the same tie. We were not a wealthy group. And so we thought we would share those things. There'll be multiple voices, and I'll say voice of when I'm reading from somebody's voice. I'll give the person who I'm reading from. And that's all you need to know. I will. Now what you need to know is just listen to the voices. Oh, I have to mention that one of the voices is mine. I'd been like a photographer who was not in the picture because he was taking the picture. And I'd left myself out, and then the hardest poems to write were those in my voice, because I had to fess up to embarrassing things, and I did. Prelude, my voice. How to imagine the Chasers, a band of 12 high school guys, more club than gang. Their jackets made them visible at Tucson High, 1956 to 1959. 11 were Mexican American, 1 Jewish. Ethnicity was trumped. You were or were not a chaser. I was a chaser. Most said we'd turn out badly. After meeting up for our 50th Tucson High School reunion, we chasers remembered what we never forgot, what we held close, the people and places we never let go. Little wonder that once we resumed, we couldn't stop gathering, looking back, unforgetting. That was cool, Gustavo. Didn't expect that. Walnuts, voice of Frank Howe. He's one of the guys with the jacket and tie, right? The shared jacket and tie. My first day, first grade in Purtleville, outside Douglas. Kid breaks a chair, blames me. Older brother Jimmy looks in window, sees I'm crying, runs home, tells mother, who gets angry at teacher, pulls me out of school. We moved to California, follow crops, first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth grade, pure survival. I lose 2 years of school. At labor camp, one faucet, one outhouse, one stove. We Mexican migrant kids bused to school, dropped in cafeteria, given paper and crayons, brought back to fields for lunch. Mother brings burritos, and I feel happy. We work until 5 or 6. Being with family is good. The money's in walnuts, but Jimmy and I pick apricots and tomatoes, bending over, backaches. Dad picks oranges and lemons. By grade 6, we settle in Tucson, but that summer we go back to California's walnuts. Dad takes a pole with hook at one end, shakes walnuts from trees. Jimmy and I collect as fast as we can, fill gunny sacks, dump, make piles. Mother follows, sits, peels green husks, drops them in buckets. Back to Tucson. School's already started. Suddenly blank. My voice. Summers in Mexico City I play, speaking Spanish with my cousins, Jaime, Hector, Edgar, Irma. At home in Madison, I speak Spanish with Mom. I speak English with Mom, Spanish with Dad. When I'm 4, Mom and Dad show me off to their friends. Let me speak English. Ask me to speak Spanish. On display, I cringe, feeling out of place. Every day after school, on Dad's lap, I unfold my day in Spanish. Then, at 6 years of age, I talk about my visit to the zoo. The word elefante, gone, utterly gone. It's as if Spanish is a screen that flickers, turns off, suddenly blank. Now I'm like the other Madison kids. The pain, as if my tongue yanked out by the root. A piece of me gone. Fastest naked sprinter. Voice of Vicky de la Hante speaking about Ray Escalante. We had swimming parties at El Encanto Estates. We'd scout, see who's on vacation, and use their pool. One time when we were there, Ray forgot his trunks, the beachcombers we wore. Ray didn't have any. We were swimming when somebody called the cops. They came and we took off running. They threw on the spotlight, and there was Ray running across the street, bare ass naked. One morning at Shannon's house, her parents took off for the day. Ray lived across the street. He saw the car leave and went over. They're doing shenanigans when her parents come back and Shannon comes out in a bathrobe. Her dad goes in the bedroom, opens the closet door, and there's Ray. He takes off across the street, bare ass naked. Ray and Shannon got into an argument. He sped off, rolled that old green thing, flipped it on the corner. We ran there, Shannon hysterical. Ray stood up, saying, like he did, "Oh, Jesus." Sports people. Voice of Angie Lopez. You Chasers were a band of brothers, a fraternity, so close, and you've started again. You Chasers were smart, kept it secret, 2 sets of books, never looked like nerds, nobody messed with you. I know what you were up against. When I taught at Sunnyside, the best students were shamed, called schoolboy and schoolgirl. The jealousy. That's why I was shocked to learn Bobby became a neurologist, Richard and Ralph lawyers, Koenig a psychiatrist, you, professor of anthropology. You Chasers were sports people, 5 on the football team. You captain of the swim team. Others played baseball and basketball. Anglo girls went after you. Tom King said Anglo boys felt jealous, wondered why you crashed their parties. Didn't know the girls had invited you. I've always wondered why you went steady with me, a Mexican girl. Most Chasers dated Anglo girls. At your parties, you danced with your dates. not like Mexicans, guys on one side, girls on the other. There was loyalty. Everyone had your back. It wasn't spoken, it just was. The Chaser Mystique. Voices of Richard Rocha and Bobby Shoemaker. Most said we turn out badly. Our name signified wild guy, partier, fighter. We thrived on reputation. Whether they admired or hated us, everyone knew who we were, our jackets, our spot in the stairwell. We played the cat, built a mystique, but we were just Mexican kids, out for fun, nothing profound. One dad in moving and storage, Chico's dad a professor, another selling beer at ball games, another a cop, and yet another head of a rotating credit association, the Alianza Hispanoamericana. We were in shape. Every summer, our arms threw baseballs, our backs strained under bulky furniture. One worked as a lifeguard. We hadn't seen each other for 50 years, gathered at the Tucson High School reunion, told ourselves stories about ourselves, laughed as if we'd been together the day before. At our reunion, people still talked about us, still gave us shit after 50 years. Champagne in a martini glass. Voice of Dicky Cotarrobles. Our jackets make us who we are, visible, guys on the wild side. At Dave Bloom and Sons, we look at jackets, need better than the long coats the Gaylord sport. We choose short, wool, gray. Our name means chasing girls. I draw a guy, like Little Abner, running after a skimpily dressed girl. I passed this logo by George Hunt, Dean of Boys. Get nixed. A seamstress machine embroiders crimson letters. Chasers above, Tucson below. I design a new logo, pink champagne, 3 bubbles, one bursting from tilted glass, toothpick in olive. Chasers. Whoa. Sorry. Very much in demand, you see. Chasers, drinks after a glass of hard liquor. But I know nothing, only beer, nothing about hard liquor, mixed drinks. I put champagne in a martini glass. Make our jacket unique, beautiful. Dean Hunt stares, sees no beauty, says, no, not on campus, no alcoholic beverage. Wear your jackets anywhere in town, but never here on campus. This is my best effort to do a fashion show twirl. Poor Dean Hunt, he sees no beauty. Not from Tucson. Dad's family moved from Minatitlan, Veracruz to Mexico City when he was a child. After his first year in college, he migrated to Chicago, then got his PhD at the University of Illinois, and married an Anglo woman from nearby Flora. Later, he taught in the Spanish department at the University of Wisconsin. I liked Madison, my friends, the snow, being a good student, sandbot, baseball, and football. When I'm 12, winter of grade 8, we moved to Tucson. A jolt, nothing green, desert. While waiting for the school bus, we build fires, warming the early morning chill. A new friend calls Mexicans dirty, looks my way, says he doesn't mean me. I see what I'm up against, where I have to stand, decide I must relearn Spanish, must become Mexican American. I talk on and on with my grandmother as she cooks chilaquiles, budín azteca, arroz con pollo. Mama Emilia speaks no English. In fits and starts, my Spanish begins to flow. Then I join the Chasers. You won't do well. Voice of Angie Lopez. I wonder whether in high school we separated from Anglos or they segregated us. Neither Irene, rodeo queen, nor Clara, student council, kept their distance, but many of us did. Guidance counselors played a role. When I registered for 9th grade, I requested algebra. But my counselor asked if I knew what it was. I said I took it in 8th grade. He asked for my report card, but I didn't have it. He said, let's put you in general math. If you do well, we'll put you in algebra next year. No more discussion. I knew no better, just went along. The class was all Mexican. I remember Bobby Science, gorgeous, but he couldn't add or subtract. I was bored, passed only because Eddie Lopez and I competed for grades. Next year, algebra, all Anglos, all freshmen. Counselors treated us as if we were dumb, tracked us away from college. When I told my counselor I was going to college, he discouraged me. And I thought, he just doesn't know. I'm smart. English class, all Mexicans. Mr. Egan, the teacher, asked, who's going to college? He said, you won't do well. Your vocabulary's poor. You'll be placed in English X, never get out. Tears rolling down my cheeks, I walked away. Ode to Ralph, my voice. You talk about your favorite movie, Stand and Deliver, how the Bolivian calculus teacher inspires his AP students to study con ganas and excel. You forget a detail from the film. You forget how the teacher's star pupil, a badass, Pachuco, follows your lead, buys 2 sets of books, one for home, one for school, never carries any. Nobody messes with him at Garfield High, East LA. You forgot your legacy to me. Let me refresh your memory. You got A's in our biology class, but never carried the textbook. You'd read the book, memorized the definitions that were on the test. Mitosis, meiosis. You confided your secrets when I asked. You bought 2 sets of books, one for school, one for home. After that, I never carried books, and nobody messed with me. You redeemed my high school years. You put up my name to be a chaser. You taught me the 2-book survival skill. I owe you, Ralph. Papá y yo hablamos en mi voz. Papá dice, el delahante me dice que le da vergüenza hablar conmigo en español. Piensa que no lo habla bien. Dice el chato, le intimidaste, ¿qué le dijiste? Papá dice, le pregunté que si me entendía cuando le hablaba. Él dijo que me entendía sin problema. Y le dije que yo también le entendía perfectamente. Le dije, si nos entendemos así, seguiremos hablándonos en español, sin nada de vergüenza. No hay por qué hablar inglés. Packaging. In my voice and that of Louis Dunsey. It has an epigraph from José Montoya's classic poem, El Louis. His life had been remarkable. We eat supper at Frank's. Louis silent. After dessert, he tells about his life flying Cessnas filled with weed from Mexico and Jamaica to just over the Arizona border. He found the best places for menudo in Santa Fe and the South Valley of Albuquerque. In Boston, he once played poker with Ted Turner. Yes, that Ted Turner. Those bets were so big, Louis folded. His guardian angel was a woman who studied law to get justice for her unjustly imprisoned husband. Louis gave her money, supported her through law school. He was no snitch. His first time in prison, he was well taken care of, given joints he then passed on to people who cleaned his cell. When he returned to the business, he dropped down the totem pole, transporter to packager. He shrink-wrapped 300-pound blocks of marijuana to load them in car trunks. Before he got busted the second time, his expensive cars and fancy entrance gate were asking for trouble. Salud. Before he got busted the second time, I'm going back, his expensive cars and fancy entrance gate were asking for trouble. Once his boss was arrested, he knew he'd be next. Knowing he was being watched, he stood in his front yard and smoked a fine joint. He knew he'd get no joints that fine imprisoned. The court ordered him to rehab and took a year off his prison term. In Florence Penitentiary, his second prison term, he served as the elder in a Native American sweat lodge. 50 people had his back. Even so, prison was hard this time. He's too old to continue as before. Because he never snitched and is out of the loop, he can now safely quit the business. After Louis finished talking, we sat stunned, silent. Bobby said, Louis shown we were hot air, not guys on the wild side. I am a chaser. Last poem, my voice. After gathering for our 50th reunion, an afternoon beer led to late breakfast the next day, and on, almost comic repetition. An urgent need held us captive. We couldn't keep ourselves from reunioning. As we told stories, chaser days, late 50s, time flows in and out of me. Chico then, professor now, always chato, the depth and opacity of a dream. Where and when did I begin? And where did I end? A memory, a dream, a feeling. Forgotten chatter gets closer, clearer, an invitation to the past, from the present. In the grip of stories, I came to know my debt to the 11 guys who had my back, who sustained, who taunted, who toughened, who carried me through teenage years to my emergence. The passage of time gifted me certainty. I am a chaser. He is a chaser, so is he. He really is a chaser. And on, almost comic repetition. The ease of my acceptance by the chasers mirrored the ease of my acceptance of the chasers. I doubt about belonging dissolved, the value of what we lived, the world we created, affirmed. We remembered and re-remembered. We told and retold stories, one by one, together, multiple versions, one weaving, different hues, resilient fabric. Thank you. Gustavo. Play over there so it'd be three-dimensional. It was.
An honor to be here with you and to be invited to talk about your book with you. I thought I would, rather than make any sort of lengthy commentary, I thought I would...
Excuse me, can you speak up a little bit?
Yeah, I don't know if this is on actually. It is on?
Yeah.
Am I not speaking? Is that better?
Yes.
Oh, okay, sorry, I was holding it wrong, my fault. I thought rather than giving any sort of lengthy commentary, I would revisit the text and some different poems from those that Renato read that I think illustrate some of the themes that he's already touched on in his reading and that I think are really vivid and so relevant to so many topics in the moment that he's writing about, but today as well. And I thought, it's hard for me to separate this book from the other book that we're lucky, I feel lucky to be a part of, that's based on a workshop that we had together with Mary Louise and Christina in New Mexico in March, and some other people, where we were working around the title, The Shifting Terrain of Citizenship Among People of Mexican Origin in the United States. And we spent a week thinking about how to respond to the scapegoating by the current president of Mexican and Mexican origin people. And there's no way in 2019 to read Renato's book of poetry about going to high school a few miles from the border and creating this wonderful group in the 1950s without thinking about the moment we're in and its historical precedents. And in his essay for that collaboration, Renato dates the framing of Mexican populations in the US being scapegoated as a menace to the US-Mexico War and the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. But we can see when he says what I'm up against when he first arrives in Tucson and the kid makes the insensitive racist comment that in the 50s, stereotyping by school and law enforcement authorities was robust, and we can hear vividly in Angie's commentary in two poems the ways that she felt limited by the expectations of her. And I think the Chasers' adventures are framed within this dual context of what at one point is described as, you know, this idea of being able to do okay or become a juvenile delinquent, right? These rather limited options that they see as being available to them. And they find in each other a particular frame of masculine sociality, a way to be, on the one hand, that maintained your street cred as cool, right? Which was very important, but also gave them the social support and a way to be true to their parents' expectations and to meet their own expectations for their own success. So we can see, you know, all of the activities that they're engaged in, which are so vivid, and if you read all of the poems together, not only the jackets, but the very vivid descriptions of driving, you know, crisscrossing Tucson, picking up every chaser from his house. I think you were the one driving often. You know, this exclusive criteria for membership, being a chaser or not. The initiation into the group, the exclusion of some members who couldn't cut it, who were, you know, aspirational members. And, you know, in this collectivity, they were able to produce a space in which they not only succeeded both by conventional measures, we see this extraordinary kind of list of professional achievements that they would go on to achieve, but also, I think, more importantly, in their own and each other's eyes, being dedicated and loving fathers and partners and friends, and having this really wonderful community together. And I think, you know, for me, one of the beautiful things about the Chasers is this notion of a non-toxic cis heteromasculinity, this way to kind of be, you know, at the same time that they're sort of hormonally fueled and their name refers to chasing girls, but they're extraordinarily respectful of young women. The girls are inviting them to crash the parties. They're being rewarded with extra attention and intimacy from the girls because of the mutual respect. Angie Lopez, the only honorary female chaser, as I gather, remarks of how respectful they were to her. And I think at least part of it must come from the mutual respect. And we can see in the poems how wonderful, I think, the parents were, especially the moms. And I think the moms are setting a tone. And so there's a part in Ornamental Oranges. By the way, you know, not to, you guys were pretty tough, but the toughest thing they did was throw oranges at each other. So let's not get too carried away with the toughness. My high school friends were getting themselves in a little bit more trouble. But we see this sort of special, you know, way of interacting, and I love where in Ornamental Oranges, where I think it's Dickie's mom picks them up, so that they get picked up and they get taken to the precinct, and then from the precinct they go to Mother Higgins, which is a juvenile hall, and then the parents come to pick them up. And Mustache, the cop, lectures, "Don't hang out together, bad influence. You'll break a window, enter, become hardened criminals." Mustache makes us call our parents. Dickie's mom, "My mom comes by taxi, says, 'What are you doing tonight?' I say, 'Nothing, Mom. You told the man I was grounded.' She said, 'That man doesn't know what he's talking about. You planned something, you know?' I say, 'Yeah, Mom, we were going to have a party.' She says, 'Go to your party, okay? Don't worry about it.' I say, okay, that was it. So the mom is, you know, simultaneously reassuring the cop that they won't get into any more trouble and telling her son not to worry about it because it's really not trouble. And there's an indulgence by the parents to quietly make space for these small acts of rebellion and allow for this combination of exclusivity of kind of a lot of the exterior social opportunities, but also inclusivity that's really based on a love that is very inclusive. And so I was wondering if you could talk just a little bit about that.
Wow. Thank you, Alyshia. That just added another dimension to the book that's already there. I'm grateful. I think one of the things that I would mention right away as you're speaking of this inclusivity is a practice that we called hard-assing. Are you about to talk about it more?
Yeah, that's okay. You go first.
Okay, I'll go first. Sorry.
That's okay.
And hard-assing is when you're acting like you're being really aggressive, but you're not. It's like two dogs fighting, where you see one dog's got the other like this around the neck, but it's not biting, that it's play, right? And that's the kind of thing we were doing a lot. And the notion that we had was that this was toughening people. This is toughening people. But the other notion was that it was a form of love, and that you could do that only if you really loved the other person, if there was a bond of strong affection. And I knew with Bobby Shoemaker, one of the chasers, that I'd really arrived in his heart when he started in on me. When I was doing these interviews with him, he said, I never liked you, Chico. I really never liked you. You were always borderline. We had no way that we could reject somebody who's already a member of the Chasers. We had no way to do it. But you would have been the first. And I knew that the reason he could say that to me was because we were really on solid ground. And had we not been, he wouldn't be doing that. And there was something about a form of banter that we had going that took considerable skill. See, I had never hard-assed in Madison. Nobody did it there that I knew of. And then maybe you have a different report. But I had never done it, so I didn't have the skill that others had. And so the first time I heard guys hard-assing, the first time I tried to do it, I really flopped. So Frank Howe, the guy who was in the labor camps, came up to me, took me aside, arm over my shoulder. He says, look, Chico, don't hard-ass again. And he said, here's the main rule. It's never really about the other guy's actual mother. And so that I didn't know that rule. I got it, but I also stopped. I became a kind of quiet guy.
Well, I wanted to read a little bit of Quiet Guy because I think it's wonderful how we have Quiet Guy, which is the moment where you get scolded by Frank for doing it wrong. And then at the end of the book of poetry, we have you finally being accepted for doing it right. And so I think it's wonderful in many ways. You write in A Quiet Guy, I do the chaser's thing, hang out in the stairwell, studiously casual, nod, chin slightly upward, greeting friends. I watch the others, their chin lifts, my imitation precise. Determined to relearn Spanish, for me a matter of pride. I do relentless grammar drills, make Mexican history mine, read Los de Abajo as well as Pedro Páramo. So bookish, busting ass to be Mexican-American. I observe Bobby, master of hard-assing, mock aggression, rapid-fire retorts, verbal virtuosity. If only I could be like him. First time I give it a try, Frank pulls me aside, arm around my shoulder. Says, no more, don't do it again. You'll get in trouble. Remember, it's really never about the other guy's mother. A kid from Madison I've never hard-assed. I feel like a phony Mexican-American. Become a quiet guy. No more banter. And I think this is one of the wonderful things I thought, I imagined we'd have a room full of anthropologists tonight. And so I think there's something really, I think if any of us ever wondered what made you the anthropologist you are, I think we see it in this poem. And I think there's something about being a fish out of water that really shaped your skills at listening and absorbing and being able to reproduce for us 50 years later. And you took a very ethnographic approach to the poetry. We see an ethnographic, we see the methodology of going to the reunion and talking to the guys and filming some of the conversations and turning them into poetry and then going back and checking to see if you got it right. And it's an echo of what you were doing when you were a kid, where you were attempting and being corrected and then being quiet for a while. And there's something, there's a socialization that I find so touchingly described. I wanted to share, there's something very gender specific and culturally specific in Mexican and Mexican-American communities with the chin lift. And that for me was just so vivid. Having grown up in Southern California, and as a white girl, I wasn't allowed to do the chin lift. I wasn't included in that form of communication, but I was able to observe it. And when I took my son Lázaro with me to do field work, when he was almost 1 to Mexico City, he wasn't yet walking and he was barely talking. But he learned immediately within about 48 hours to lift up his chin in response to young men usually greeting him from across the room. And somehow he just knew what to do, and he still does it. And I recognize this from my upbringing in heavily Chicano spaces in Southern California. And I think your awkwardness of not getting it quite right back then, as well as your ability to get it right in your remembrance and your description and your poetry. It was what put you at the borderline at the time, right? But it reinforced your membership and your contribution all those years later, which is important for your friends. But it's also, I think, very valuable for us as anthropologists to think about those experiences where we are, we're incompetent in the modes of communication and have to be quiet and shut up and listen for a little while.
That's a case where comprehension is way ahead of ability to speak. You know when you learn another language that you understand far more than you can say. And that was how I eventually was able to speak, by just listening as hard as I could. And of course, the purpose of what I was doing, I felt like my life depended on it. I didn't feel like this was, a bookish lesson. It was that my life really depended on it. And my goal was not social description, not trying to write an ethnography. It was to go native, which of course anthropologists say you shouldn't do. And I think that's a mistake. That when you do something that categorical, and it seems to me that there may be circumstances where you shouldn't go native. Maybe you'll stop writing, right? Tragic? I'm not sure. But But you know, you made the decision to join the secret society in a religious group or something, and you said that this is what I need to do, what I want to do. And I think that it was some kind of proof of whether I was getting it right or not. And of course there are these very simple things that you can observe, like learning to leave a party, right? And what Madison does is you slip away. You don't want to break up the party. You don't want to call attention to yourself because you're some modest Midwesterner, right? And Chicanos say goodbye and goodbye and don't leave, right? So do other groups.
Well, I thought I would read a little bit from I Never Liked You.
Oh, good.
Since we've referenced it. So this is Bobby Shoemaker's voice. Bobby says, "Now that I mention it, Chico, I never liked you. I said, who the hell is this guy trying to swim, get records, good grades? Who the hell voted for him? As we got older, we appreciated you more, were more respectful, realized what you'd accomplished. But at the time, you were borderline. I mean, borderline. I don't think we voted anybody out, but you were borderline." Chico says, "Borderline's the word for me. I was awkward, grew up in Madison as if from another planet. Snow, green trees. In Tucson, brown, desert, sand, cacti, Mexican border an hour south. In Madison, I competed with friends for A's. A- spelled defeat. I played football in 8th grade. Even then, without telling friends, I aimed for a PhD. Hate to tell you this, Bobby, but I've yet again flubbed my chance to come back at you. In Chaser days, I admired how you hard-assed. So quick, so clever, never speechless, always a retort. Next to you, I felt trapped in silence. What I needed to say, bursting to get out, but not even a whisper. I yearned for a nimble tongue. Yes, borderline." But I think this book of poetry is a wonderful retort after all these years. And
I hope I shut Bobby up for 2 minutes.
I think so, and I think we can see, you know, I've had the opportunity to witness an awe and admiration for Renato's quite subtle, but no less deadly academic hard-assing, in which he can, with a turn of phrase, slice someone's ego in half without them even noticing it. I'll note this is always deserved, and is often greatly appreciated in the context in which it occurs, because it's often at the defense of a more vulnerable colleague or student, or to let the air out of someone who needs it. But I can see now in the School of Hard Knocks, these routine drives, circumnavigating the entire city of Tucson while the chasers hard-assed each other the whole way, how you learned your craft. And I think this is a craft that definitely has served your second career as a poet, and your first career as an anthropologist, and your overarching vocation as a teacher. And I think you execute in writing and verbally a masterful economy of phrasing. And so for me, this was such an honor to be asked to do this, because when I was writing my dissertation, you came to NYU just as I was finishing field work, and I was so grateful to remember to have your advice that even though it was just a dissertation, it was a text that readers would read, and that I should do my readers a favor and think about the writing as a craft. And I've never forgotten this lesson. Every text I ever write, no matter how short or academically pedantic, I hear your words in my head and try to be empathetic to my readers and take writerly responsibility for producing a text my readers might enjoy reading. So I want to thank you for all of your writing and your teaching.
Thank you. It's hard to keep a dry eye. And you know, wow. And when Alyshia read the poem about Bobby Shoemaker, you know, I never liked you. That started me going. And I've always wanted to be a loving man who knew how to cry and could stand his ground. So you've tuned into it. Thank you. We should take any questions if there are any. Are there any questions or comments? Refutations? Oh, there's one. Leave it to Christina for a refutation.
This is so lovely, and I've been sort of hearing about this as it evolves, so it's so exciting to see it come to this beautiful fruition. But I had a question about timing. I was just thinking about what it meant to be young Mexicano, you know, Mexican American kids in the 50s, and the fact that you're talking about 1958, 59. And I guess I just think about that because I think about what it might mean to be in 68 or 69. It just feels like the group you were in was part of this really interesting, important generation that kind of was right, you know, before the Chicano movement, at a time when you're in high school when nobody cares about Mexican American children and their dreams, because they're supposed to be labor, right? So I guess I was curious if you thought a lot about the era you came of age in, because you're 18 and 59, right? And then 10 years later, it's a really different landscape. And so I was just thinking about what it meant to come up in the 50s and what the 50s meant to you.
Yeah, what the 50s meant to me. One thing is that the things we were doing that we thought were really wild, in retrospect, seem pretty tame. And, you know, like one of the parents, Bobby Shoemaker, talks about the orange fight. And he says, nobody has ever been knocked out by an orange. And so even though that seemed like a wild thing to do, and the cops did pull us in, and we were taken to the juvie and all of that, it was an adventure, but it was an adventure with very few casualties.
Right.
And so there was a whole sense of what was possible then and how impossible it was later. I mean, there were no drugs that we were involved in, no hard liquor, a little beer. The beer was always an adventure to go buy it when you're underage, and it's really exciting, but it's hardly very consequential. And I think that it was almost as if there certainly were no guns, and there really was nobody killed. I mean, there were fist fights and stuff like that, but that's not fatal. That's not life-threatening in any way. But it was a lot of fun to be running around doing all this stuff. And I think that something that's really important is that we had very little awareness at the time, or I should say I did more than most of the other chasers, of the guidance counselors and what they were doing to us. And Angie has told me, she said, you know, when I went to the University of Arizona, people there, because by then Mecha was starting, that there was a Chicano movement, and they said, these are the things that probably happened to you in high school. And she said, geez, I never thought of it that way. I didn't have that awareness. But then she went back and realized what the guidance counselors had said to her, what her English teacher had said to her. But it was, she hadn't put it together as in any kind of systematic way. So it was something that was coming from looking back, but not experienced at the time. But I certainly was acutely aware of how there were no Mexicans in freshman algebra, right? And she had gone to a Catholic school, and they had taught her algebra in 8th grade. She'd taken the course, right? So, anyway, the other thing is Tucson's also a Sun Belt city, and it expanded enormously in population. So when I went to Tucson High, it was 6,000 students. We were on 3 shifts. And I remember I went to school from 7 in the morning till noon. And I used to joke at the time. I said, well, they have me so little time they can do relatively little damage. And but the other thing, of course, is that that was the only school in the city, right? And what was about to happen was Pueblo was going to be created. It was an all-Mexican school, predominantly Mexican school. Catalina, a white school, Rincon, another white school, but the neighborhood schools were resegregated. And that hadn't happened yet. And all of my classmates, all of us were acutely aware of how this was a very special moment for when we were at Tucson High School. And had it been just a couple years later, we couldn't have had the same experience. And so it was that too was a special thing about the period of the late 50s. They had not yet built the new schools. They were under construction. Yes.
Renato, could you speak a bit about the process of the book? That is, you mentioned that there was a reunion and then there was a re-reunion. Did you approach, I mean, the product is obviously poetry. Did you approach this then as a ethnography and oral history? Did you record? What happened? How did you,
Okay.
well, how did this happen from the moment of the high school reunion onto the book? If I could ask that pedestrian question about method, if you could.
Yes, if you have 3 days, I can answer that question. But I'll do it briefly. I started doing this because all of us chasers were amazed at how we had the reunion. We kept getting together and that it was so meaningful for all of us. And we didn't expect that. We didn't know what to expect. We just said, we'll get together and see what happens. But we entered it without expectations of, will this be a one-night stand or an enduring relationship? And it turned out to be the latter. And so we said, we should have some memento, some way to remember this. And we thought photographs. So we took snapshots. And I then said, you know, my brother is a videographer. He records events. He's got a video camera. And then once I started talking to him about it, he said, well, you're an ethnographer. Why don't you do interviews? You supposedly know something about this. Let's see if you do that. And it was rather amazing to be doing interviews with people you know that intimately and have known that long. And you can even ask, well, tell me the story about that I know was a favorite story, or tell me what your favorite stories are, and so on. That, you know, I had a way of eliciting and responding that I wouldn't have had if I'd never seen these guys before, right? And I said, well, what I should do is make a documentary film. And of course, it had not occurred to me that I didn't know how to make the documentary film. But I actually then said, well, I'll team up with somebody. I'll do a collaborative thing with somebody who knows what they're doing. And so I did. I talked to people in anthropology and the film program, and And then they informed me that, you know, these look like home movies because your brother didn't have the latest equipment with light and sound the way it should be. And then somebody else said to me, you know, you can do great things with home movie type footage, and you can really put, and I said, wait, I'm too far out of my depth here. I can't do that. That's just too hard for me to do, but if I got somebody who wanted to take it on, I would work with them. But instead what happened was somebody in the program said, you know, you can get somebody to transcribe this, and a lot of filmmakers do this, and it's not that expensive. So I had it transcribed. I said, this is terrific.